Hello, welcome to the March 29th, 2024 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo and I'm the host of the livestream today. If you have not attended a livestream before, how it works is you can ask questions in the chat field and we'll go through them chronologically. And we could also send questions in advance to Club Cubase at steinberg.de when asking questions. If you could specify which level of Cubase you're running, if it's version 11, 12, 13, or earlier. Also, if you're running Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, that information is helpful. When also asking questions, if you could specify the particular operating system that you're running currently. So that all that information is great, and we should have an index of all the topics covered in today's live stream pinned several hours after the live stream ends. So you can look for that pinned to the top of the comments field. If you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you can go to cubaseindex.com, and we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating that. We have two people that serve as moderators, Agent K and Jazz Dude. So I give special kudos to them for their efforts in making a better community. We'll also give Jazz Dude special thanks for his efforts with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord, which is a wonderful resource of information for the Steinberg community. So my name is Greg Undo. I'm presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia, and I'll be the host today. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America, and I primarily focus on Steinberg products. So, and today we will, since it's the last live stream of the month, in about 2 hours, we will start our Zoom social meetup. And again, we'll have famed engineer, producer, Chuck Ainlay joining us as a special guest, sharing some of his insights with you. So Chuck has won 4 Grammys, I think 10 ACM awards, 2 Tech awards, 2 CMA awards. He's worked with artists such as Reba McEntire, George Strait, Peter Frampton, Mark Knopfler, Dire Straits, Ann Wilson of Heart, just everyone in the country music genre. So look for that in about 2 hours, but we'll go ahead and begin since we have kind of a shorter time today. So let's go ahead and start with the first question. All right, so we have Patrick saying hi. See that? So inactive user asks, hi Greg in chat, is it possible to route a bus to 2 different buses? Example, bus 1 goes into bus 2 and 3. And is it possible to rename sends and send insert slot for better overview? All right, so let's start with the buses. So let's say if I have a particular loop, we'll just load up a okay, so I'll just take this particular drum loop and we are going to drag this over. So let's go ahead and we'll just place this into musical mode. So as we play, and we'll have this loop. So right now if we want to send this to a bus, what we would do is we could select this particular track. We will now come over and say group channel to selected track. So we could do this in a couple of different ways. One is we could just right click and say group channel to selected channels. All right, so as we do this, now we can see our group that's been created. And if we wanted to send this group to 2 other groups, there's a couple different approaches. One is we could add 2 different group channels. So another method of getting a track to a group is using sends or direct routing. So I'm going to add 2 groups. All right, so we have group 1, group. So if we want to send this signal from group 1 to group 2 and group 3, I could go to group 1, and when we go to open up, let's say the sends, we could now send this to group 2 and to group 3. So now we could send that one source to group 1. Group 1 is now being sent to group 2 and 3. If we didn't want to use sends, another method to do this is with the concept of direct routing. So we could open up direct routing. So I could take this particular track. Let's say we want the original track to go to the stereo output. And with direct routing, we could activate a quick mode here, or we'll just say direct routing summing mode on. So we're going to check this in the mixer. And once we go to our direct routing here, so let's say our original drum track, instead of it going to the group, we'll send it to our stereo output. So now when we go to our direct routing, we could say let's send it to group 1, to group 2, and we will send it to group 3 as well. So at this point we could just let me just do it from the mixer here real quick. So now as we play, we could send this to our different groups using direct routing as well. So this would allow us to go to different destinations. All right, and second part of the question, is it possible to rename sends in the sends insert slot for a better overview? Okay, so let's say I want to add an effect channel. So we'll go to our effects track. I'm just going to name this, we'll call it inactive user. So now that that is sent, I could just come over here and we'll say we have a delay on. We go to our sends, and as we come over here, we could just send this directly to inactive user. So whatever you name the effects channel track, you can just simply see that as the name for the send. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, we have a question. Hello, Greg. Greets from North Carolina, USA. When I load a pre-saved track preset, don't load the sends. Is there any way to save a preset and also include the sends? So track we wanted to, let's say if we have an effect send here on this particular track. So I'll add an effects track and let's add a reverb to it. Okay, so when we save an effects channel, the track preset is going to include, again, all of the inserts, the channel strip, and the EQ. If we wanted to recall these settings, like the track with the particular routing, what we could do is select the original track and the effects channel track, and we could come over here to go to export selected tracks. So we'll come over here, we can reference the media files or copy the media files. We'll give it a name. So here we'll just call it Asfarita, who asked a question. Okay, I'm going to save this on my desktop. And we'll go to a new project. And as we go to our new project, so we have brand new, we will choose to, so we export selected tracks, but we import a track archive. So it's a little odd with that. So now I'm going to import those two tracks. We'll select all. And as we do this, the channel with the routing is preserved. So we want to export selected tracks if you wanted to include routing to groups or different effects channels as well. All right, so we see from Patrick, hi Greg, I just found a transformer MIDI insert. Can I use it to sustain chords on a shared copy without affecting the other tracks using that same shared copy? So, so let me just open up a quick project here. So I'm not sure how you're using the inserts with that. There's one easy way of kind of doing this if you're using like the chord track. So let's say if I'm come over and we have like a little. What dimension am I? All right, so when we go to the MIDI insert and we choose our transformer, so what I would do if you wanted this to kind of follow like chords, if you wanted to just have sustain chords on other parts, if you're utilizing the chord track, what you could do is, so let's say we have chords over here on a chord track. I'll just select all these and we'll move them down to here. So what we could do is say, okay, we want to utilize the tracks that are, so we could just kind of send this out to monitor tracks. So as soon as I just place this track into monitor, that we could just have the chord tracks play the chords for different tracks without having to have the data. So let me know if that kind of accomplishes what you want to do. You may be able to do it through the MIDI transformer plugin, but it could be kind of a left-handed approach to that. All right, Carlo R asks, hi Greg, why do people use two monitors at the same time? What is the purpose of that, and should I also do that? So a lot of people like to have the Cubase project window on one screen and their mix console on a secondary screen. And sometimes people will have a third screen just for the MIDI editor. A lot of composers do that, and their primary screen is the MIDI editor because that's kind of where they live. So this way you don't have to constantly have different windows. So if your computer supports having multiple screens, I think it's a great investment to make because it allows you to see more items at one time very easily. So again, most people will have one screen for the project window and a secondary screen for mixing. So that's pretty common. So if you could do it, I think it's always satisfying to work that way. All right, Patrick asks, is there a way to drag audio files out of the sampler track back into the project zone? All right, so let's come over here. So let's say we're in the sampler. So I don't think we could drag it out, but as soon as I drag this file in, if we go to our pool window, so we'll go to media, to our pool window, it probably will show up under the sampler track. And now I could just drag from the sampler track from the pool right back into the project. So anytime that you drag an audio file into the sampler track, it's going to go into the pool window, and then you'll see it under the sampler track setting right there within that folder. And then from that folder, you could drag it back to your project window. So let me know if that makes sense. All right, we see Jan on from Cubase Index. Great to see you. See Michael Marshall. It just says thanks. It says thanks for all the work you're doing at Cubase Index. Is often a lifesaver for him. So all the timestamps. So it takes a while to do, and I always regret doing a live stream on a Friday night, spending working on all of the indexes until like 10 o'clock on Friday night. But I think it's great to work. It's a great resource to have. All right, so we see Peter Bata from Montreal, just wishing everyone happy Friday. Thanks for joining us. Always wonderful to see Jazz Dude. All right, Dean Garvey Jazz just comments, hello Greg, Cubase 13, Pro 13 runs very well on a Windows 10 Pro PC with the i10, with Intel i7, 10 OU, 10th generation CPU, 32 gigs of RAM, and 1 terabyte SSD. It seems a little faster in Cubase Pro 12, so generally it will get a, there's always optimizations going on for processors, so. All right, great to see Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo. All right, Carlo R asks, do I really need 64 gigabytes of RAM for epic music, or is that overkill? So it could really depend on what you consider epic music. So when more RAM, like 64 gigs of RAM, is really good is when you have lots of orchestral sample libraries. So I think the Beatles did a lot of epic stuff, with 4 tracks, and there's, many incredible recordings done with fewer tracks. But if you're doing a lot, if you're kind of want to do a Ludwig Göransson, Hans Zimmer, Junkie XL type of projects where it's like huge orchestral and synths, then having more RAM can make a difference. So, but you could probably do epic music with less RAM. All right, so we see from Patrick, Cubase's MIDI device integration hasn't worked reliably for me yet. I'm trying to use an iPad app to send CC values to Cubase, but after waking up my computer from hibernation, I have to restart Cubase for it to receive messages again. So check to make sure, when you're doing that. So, see if you need the particular, for the MIDI devices. So I'm not sure if you're doing like device panels, but Cubase should be able to receive MIDI CCs from any device. But check, some audio interfaces and some MIDI interfaces that are relying on USB power can behave differently when being woken up. Sometimes, if the USB port is set to like an energy efficient mode or a power saving mode in the BIOS of a PC, that could cause it not to fully wake up. So maybe you could bypass that if you're running on PC and see, but if it's just transmitting MIDI CCs, you should be fine. All right, wonderful to see Parabot 2 on. Glad you can make it today. All right, so we see from Eduardo Diaz, hi Greg, trying to export music XML file out of Cubase, but I don't see any track names when I open it in Dorco. Any ideas? So I think we covered this a couple times, but it's, so I don't think that is carried over in the music XML file, so I'll pass it along again to the team. But I think we, may see some interesting things coming, from Dorco as well. Okay, so we see Masta LBC asks, hi Greg, with the last update I got a stutter while playback like every 15 seconds. CPU and audio is not really under load. What can I check Cubase 13 Pro? So I'm not sure if you're on Mac or PC, but I would check to make sure, one, see if it makes any difference if you go to your studio menu to studio setup and select your audio interface and go to the control panel and see if you adjust the buffers, if that makes any difference. So it could be that particular, particular buffer sizes. The higher the buffer, the easier it is on your computer. And when it gets to a particular point, maybe some information is taking up more CPU, so I would check that. I would also check to make sure, if you're on Windows, if you go to your studio menu, again to studio setup, go to your audio system, that you have, ASIO guard enabled, your multi-processing also turned on. On Windows, there's also a utility called Latency Mon, and it's by Resplendence Systems, and this is good at kind of isolating if there's something that's causing like an audio interrupt in your system. So while your CPU may be fine, it could be like a network card or a video driver that just says, hey, I need attention right now, and let me interrupt the audio playback. And hey, I'm here, let me interrupt the audio playback. So Latency Mon, LATENCYMON, by Resplendence Systems. I would check that out, and that could maybe isolate if there's a hardware that's causing that particular, causing those interruptions for you. All right, so we see from Tim Weinheimer asks, hello Greg, where is the setting to show the step input button on the key editor lower zone? Thanks. Okay. All right, so when we see this, we're going to see the button right here. So depending on your screen resolution, if you don't see it, what you could do is right click in this particular area, and then you'll see the step input. If you wanted to move it up, we could just kind of grab the line to move it up, and as we move it up, it moves it over to the left. So it could be off screen. So if this was kind of all the way down here, at this point you may not see it, but again, right click and choose the step MIDI input, and we could just move it up like that. So this is the icon. So again, right click. All right, so we have Arif B just saying greets to everyone. Thanks for joining us today. All right, Mark Madsen says, hi Greg, looking forward to today's doings. All right, you see Jazzy has posted the link for Latency Mon. Okay. All right, so we see from Patrick, when exporting MIDI files on my Windows 11 computer, they get exported as a .mid instead of .midi. Therefore, I can't use MIDI Bay to display these files, as it can only find .midi files. Okay, so let's come here. I'm going to solo this track. Let's export. So I don't think that I'll just try it on my Mac, but I think it's going to be the same. There's really no difference between the .mid, but we'll check it out. So I'm going to export MIDI file, and we'll just do it here. All right, so we see that this is .midi. Okay. All right, so now let's go to my media bay. Okay, and there's my .mid file right there. So we saved it as a .mid file. I'll go ahead and check it on my Windows 10 machine, but make sure one that you have set to all media types. But as we can see here, I changed it from a .midi to a .mid, but I don't think there's any distinction between them, but you should be able to see those. But I will, if you want to email me, I'd be happy to check on my Windows 10 machine right after. but maybe someone else could try if they're on PC now. All right. So we see Best Korean Jesus says I recently found out about track archives. What a time saver. All right. And wonderful to see Soren on from Sweden. All right. So we have Zymosis. Hi, Greg. I have a problem with Cubase 13. When I import MIDI tracks from another project, they're not automatically quantized to the grid. And the tempo of the new project in Cubase 12 is working well. Thanks. Okay, so let's come over to this. I think we have created something with this. All right, so let's say I have a MIDI file here. Okay, and as we look at the MIDI file, we can see that we have 4 quarter notes here. So pretty straightforward. Our tempo is set to 120 beats per minute. So I'm going to save this project. So we'll say save. Okay. And now what I want to do, and we'll call this March 26, 2024. Let's now go to a new project. And so a brand new project, and we'll import those MIDI files. I'm going to change my tempo here to, let's say, 99 beats a minute. So let's go ahead and import tracks from project. Okay, so that's our track. So we're at a different tempo. So let's go ahead and look at the event here. All right, so we see that this isn't lining up, but let's come over and make sure that this is set. All right, so I'm going to check one other thing here. So let's go back to our original project. And let's make sure that this track is set to musical mode. All right, so now I'm going to do this and we're going to export. I'm going to save this track as musical mode. So it was in linear mode, and linear mode the track didn't work. So now we look at this, we're at 120 beats per minute, and we look at it in our drum editor, that now we can see that this, and I'm going to save it with musical mode as opposed to linear mode for the track. And we'll do a new project again. Now let's import tracks. I'm going to change my tempo here from 120 to 99 again. And let's go to import tracks from project. We'll choose the same project that we saved now with the MIDI being in musical mode. With that track in musical mode. And now let's double click. And now everything is actually in time. So make sure that the original track is set to, when we look at it, that it's actually set to linear, to musical mode right here as opposed to linear mode, because then it would take those same positions at different tempos and do it based on the time position and not the musical position. All right, so I'm going to post the Zoom link. So once again, about an hour and a half, we're going to be working with Chuck Ainlay. So it's a wonderful producer engineer. Look forward to all of you meeting Chuck. All right. Okay, so we see from Patrick, is it possible to make a project logical editor presets to route specific MIDI input to all instrument and MIDI tracks? So I don't think that the project logical editor does that, but let's go ahead and take a look. So let's say we'll add a couple of instrument tracks, and I'll just set these to not connected. All right, because I think that it's going to do audio routing. So let's come over here, go to our project logical editor. All right, and let's now come over. I think that when we do this, that we could connect. Okay, so we see, okay, so let's try. So let's say we want these all to go to my Korg Nano control. So now I'll hit apply. And now we can see the input is automatically set to Nano control for all of the MIDI tracks there. So again, just choose transform. Container type is track. You could do selected tracks if you want. Track operation, connect input, and then you could set the MIDI input port right there. All right, wonderful to see Uno Memento from Finland. All right, great to see Daniela Tocan from Germany. All right, so we see Ryan Thomas says, hi Greg, Windows 11 user here running 1303. I still have graphic glitches while using Groove Agent SE. I tried the NVIDIA GPU settings that were recommended. Is there another fix? So one is make sure that there is updates for Groove Agent SE as well, so make sure that you're running the latest versions of Groove Agent SE. I don't know any other specific fixes, but if you want to send me a screenshot, you could email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. I'd be happy to pass it along and see if we get it sorted out for you. But make sure that you are running the latest Groove Agent version as well. All right, so we see from inactive user, thank you so much for the direct routing. Is a game changer for me, and with the sends helped me a lot. So thumbs up. Glad it was helpful. Always great to see Robbie Bowling from Dallas, Texas. All right, Best Cream Jesus just says, that's crazy. I just mentioned I discovered archives. What a question. All right, so we see Uno Memento says, I will not be able to participate in the Zoom meetup today. Will be available later on, for example, YouTube or somewhere. So I generally, I want to keep it as kind of like an exclusive thing for Club Cubase community. And I kind of told Chuck that, you wouldn't have to prepare anything and wouldn't be recorded. So I don't think that we'll be recording it, but sorry that you won't be there. All right, and we have Gard Eriksson checking in from Norway. Madge Deepers wishing everyone a happy Easter weekend. To you as well. All right, inactive user asks, is there a way to rename inserts? Like, for example, I have two instances of the same plugin, but I want to rename one of them to easily see which one is the right one, like with sends renaming. So I think that the inserts are going to just be the name of the particular plugin. So I don't think that, they're going, because it's just going to show the particular plugin that's instantiated on the insert. So I don't think that there's a way to rename it. Yeah, so I don't know. And so yeah, so I don't think that there's a way to rename it. It's just going to show the name of the particular plugin. All right, so we have a question from Julio Osorio. Hi, Greg. Question here, please. I have a keyboard with no modulation wheel, just a pitch wheel. So can I use my pitch wheel as modulation wheel in Cubase? How? All right, so let's say we could do this probably with an input transformer. So if we want to come over here, we'll see this little squiggly line here, and right here, and this is where we could do it just on the track. And let's go ahead and open the panel. And so what we want to do is transform our pitch bend wheel. And on this track, I'm going to open up a MIDI monitor plugin. So, and I don't think my MIDI controller is working. Let me see if I could do it from. It's not going to show it there. So what we could do is we want to take type is equal to pitch bend, and we want to choose transform. And at this point, we could choose to, here we want to say we want to change it to a controller. And we want this controller, we'll say subtype, is going to set to a fixed value, and we want this to be CC modulation. So this way we could take MIDI pitch bend values and convert those into modulation or other controllers. So give that a try. All right, so we have Patrick Emmanuel A. Great to see you on. Hi, Greg. Happy to be on live. Can I sidechain kick with arpeggiator? When kick plays, it should trigger a sidechain in arpeggiator. Is it possible on Cubase? Okay, so. All right, so I guess you want the, all right, so let's go ahead and just create a new project. Okay, so let's just put some kicks on. Okay, so let's say we have. Okay, so let's say we have that as our kick, and now we want to have a synth with an arpeggiator on it. So let's come over to just add like a retro log. Okay. All right, just populate some chords on this part here real quick. Okay, so I'm going to take this and I'm just going to drag some chords. So I'm going to say chords to MIDI. All right. So now we have. All right, so I'm going to take this audio out. And I'm going to take a compressor. And we'll set our sidechain input from the kick. Okay, and I'm going to put an arpeggiator. So now we have. And let's come over here and put, let's say, Apache on. All right, let me just. Knock this track up an octave. All right, so just go to so you could probably do something like that, or if you wanted to have the, a gate that was keyed and doing sidechain on the noise gate as well. So this way you could only hear the arpeggios when the kick isn't turning on. So let's say if I go to my dynamics and let's go to a gate, and we could set up a sidechain on the gate. So now the kick will. So you could do like sidechaining of the gate. So when a kick comes in that you could compress or just use that as the particular gate to open up the arpeggios if you want. So. Okay, so we see Manuel Ramsey just says, glad you can make it today. All right. Okay, so we see Patrick asks, I add the add sub bass to chords MIDI logical editor preset and tweaked it to only keep the bass notes of a piano part. I want to know how to modify it to only keep the melody instead. Okay, so if we have, let me jump back to this project and take a look at some of the MIDI in this. And let's go to the logical editor preset. And let me just find the one, add sub bass to chords. Okay, so maybe instead of the insert command, you could just choose to delete. So say we'll come here, and now you could, that would do probably the opposite. So instead of just doing the insert, try just in the filter conditions for the functions, try setting that to delete instead. Okay. All right, so we had Red Groovers as just sitting in the back of the class sipping a beer. Don't tell the teacher. All right, I won't mention it to myself. All right, so we see Daniela Tocan just says, I run classical compositions now servers. I suggest server or workstation RAM. This means ECC RAM and not ordinary consumer RAM. ECC RAM is much more stable than consumer RAM, much cheaper. Well, thanks for sharing the insights. So we see Carlo asks, should I use RAID if one or two SSD fails? So, some people, if you're working in kind of mission critical areas, can run RAIDs for, just for redundancy. A lot of times I think that the SSDs are pretty reliable now, and I think a lot of people that used to do that now will just do kind of regular backups, but you can do it. All right, so Patrick Emmanuel A just says, Greg, show some interesting stuff on sampler inside Cubase 13. We don't know. All right, so a couple things in the sampler that are missed by a lot of people. One, and we kind of showed this a bit a couple live streams ago, but let's say if we have a sampler track here, so let's say I have, let's look at sampler track. All right, I'm just gonna, so let's say we were just triggering particular notes. I'll just open up my virtual keyboard since. All right, let me just make sure I don't have any. Okay, so let's say we have the sampler track here. One is you can normalize the samples. Now, as we play samples, most samplers, like if we play a higher note, that will play faster and last longer than a smaller note. So if we go to audio warp, we can keep the length of the files as we play kind of the same length. As we want to start diving into envelopes, there's lots of great stuff that we could do with envelopes that was introduced. So let's say I in 13, so we could come over here if we wanted to adjust the attack of notes to have a slower attack or a faster attack, or I wanted to adjust, let's say, on when I release a note. And there's a unlimited levels of undo with that, but we could also just come over here and have different envelopes. So if we wanted to paint in different envelope shapes, let's say for volume, I could come here and I'm just going to kind of escalate them up. So now, and if I wanted to select a region here, or if I wanted to change the envelopes, and we could do this for, if we wanted to adjust panning as well. So let's say, okay, we want to go to our panning and we can set that to the LFO. And as we want to adjust panning, now as we work at this, we could also be very creative with kind of different filters. So let's say we wanted to come over here, let's put on a classic filter. And I could just kind of come here with, as I start to kind of paint in different filter changes. So, and if you wanted to change pitch as well, you could just kind of come over here and adjust the pitch envelope. Say, okay, I just want this to do, so let's draw in this. And we'll come over here, let's adjust. And volume. So there's all sorts of great stuff for really creative options just for working with new envelopes for alpha based effects. All right, so we see the artist known as Loved saying hello to everyone. Thank you for everything, Greg. So you're welcome. And he wants everyone to hit the like button. All right, Emron Sparks asks, is there a way to stabilize the tempo reference track? Sometimes an audio reference track would increase or decrease in tempo. All right, so let's say if we wanted to kind of stabilize it, so let's do new project. All right, so let's find something with different tempos. All right. All right, so we put this tempo on. All right, so if we wanted to do a tempo detection of this, all right, and we have so one of the things that you could do is once we have kind of your tempo detection enabled, so let's say so we have kind of varying tempo, but if we wanted that tempo to be kind of more regulated, so or more stabilized, what you could do is just kind of select the tempo, and if you wanted to just go to this center edge here, we could kind of widen out the tempo or kind of stabilize the tempo more just by grabbing. You'll see the cursor turn right over here and be able to adjust right there. So let me know if that's kind of what you're looking for. All right, Jay from Secret Studios asks, is it possible to apply plugins, Steinberg and third party, on layers within spectral layers? I thought I remembered this being possible, but don't recall. Was it a fever dream? So I think that I may have a file here that's kind of unmixed. Just see if I can find a one. Okay, so let's see if all right, so let's come over here and just unmix the vocals here on this. All right, let me just try something that's smaller. It's going to take longer than I want. Okay, so let's say we have layers here. All right, so I'm going to come over. So, but I think we can put a plugin on a particular layer. So if we come over here to VST3 effects, so I think if we, and I could maybe have to sort it out for next one, but I think if you, once you go to the layer, that when you come over to process, that you could process it through VST3 effects right there, and then be able to take different layers through different plugins. All right, so we see Piano Poet asks, hi Greg, can I export to MIDI the key signature pitch of a song? Thank you, Keko from Berlin. So I'm not sure if the key signature is actually part of a standard MIDI file. So I don't think that that is considered part of the standard MIDI file, the key signature. So, I think, you could export the MIDI data, but I don't think that the key signature is actually exported as part of the MIDI file. Let's see if we could just come over. So, the MIDI file has, very specific things that it includes, and I don't think, it'll, carry over your MIDI information. It will carry over. So let's just. So let's say we're in a key of G major, and let's go to my chord track, and we'll say chords to MIDI. So we have this, I'm a solo, let's export. Because I don't think it's actually, so we could include these different functions. But now we'll do new project and see if we can import the MIDI file. So it's going to import all of the notes So we'll do our key signature. So, but you know, the notation aspects aren't necessarily carried over in a standard MIDI file. It will carry over the notes, the velocities, the MIDI information, but I don't think it's going to export. So if you're looking, you know, to do it within a MIDI file, I don't think it's going to export. So. All right, so we see question from Patrick. I made a MIDI remote script to receive CC messages from the Metagrid app on my iPad, which connects over Wi-Fi. Cubase always ends up being the component that needs to be restarted before the script reads the data I'm sending. So, you know, so see if you have a wired MIDI controller, if that needs to be reset all the time. And then, it, you know, maybe if the wired MIDI controller doesn't have to be reset, maybe it's something with the, you know, Wi-Fi communication. That would be my first guess. Always wonderful to see Millard Brown. Glad you can make it today. I'm going to post the link for the Zoom social meetup, which will be starting in about 56 minutes. So we'll post that for everyone. Again, our special guest, Chuck Ainlay. All right, so we see just a comment about Apple uses only ECC RAM, and it's more rare for it to crash. I think both Macs and PCs crash, so they're both awesome and they both suck as platforms. All right, so Tim Weinheimer just says, thanks, Greg. That was simple. My step input icon was not turned on. So it's a nice, simple solution. Glad you found it. All right, and we have Pertti Komenen checking in from Finland. Glad you can make it today. All right, so Suede TV and Recording Studio asks, can you print out a guitar chord track sheet only? All right, so let's say if I'm here, I want to take these notes, I will come over, let's go into, I will go to my, we will say, let's create chords from the event. So now we have our chords. Let's go into our score editor. Okay, and I'm going to switch to view here to page mode. So, and I'm going to, let's say I will go to my scores, to advanced layout, and let's show chord tracks. All right, so now I think that there are options. Let me just come over. So let's say I just want to, before I do that, let me just, and I'll just hide the notes from the chords here. And again, scores to advanced layout. So again, show chord track. Let me see. Yeah. All right, let me just, all right, I'll start afresh. All right, so so we have our chords, and then I think that there is, there's a way to kind of have the chords automatically show the okay, so that we could have these automatically shown. Let me just undo a couple of steps and try a different approach. So if these are the chords that you want, that now if we and we click on the C7 icon, I think that there is a preference to automatically switch, but if we come over to chord editing somewhere, and I may have to dive into it offline, but you could, once you go to the project, we can say let's go to the chord library. But there is a way to automatically have these chords. Let's say we want to but to have those chords when we do the make chords function. So let's say if we wanted to so you could also just kind of put in the particular, so let's say, okay, I want this, and we can say, okay, I want this to be my D chord. So let me know if this is the type of chords that you want. And let's say for my G chord, you could just double click on it. But I think that there is a way to automatically have the guitar chords show up for you as well. So, but I'll do some more research on it, but let me know if I'm going down kind of the right path where you want to see, like, the chord symbols like this, where you can say, okay, I want this to be D chord, and I want this to be a G chord that's placed here, etc. So, but let me know if that's kind of what you want. So as we drop it in, you could now just go to presets and say, okay, I want this to be G chord. So different ways of doing that, but let me know if that's kind of the path you want to go. But I know there's a way, and it could be just a preference, again, to have, when you do it, make chords, to have that automatically shown up. But once you have that, then you could print out. Okay, so you see the artist known as Love just says, for those of us that can't make it to Zoom, please give Chuck our regards. So we sure will. All right, so Patrick Manuvel A just asked what's special on today's Zoom meet. So it'll be Chuck Ainlay will be our special guest. So he's worked with Taylor Swift, he's worked with Peter Frampton, Mark Knopfler, George Strait, everyone in country music, it seems, Winona. So he's done over 300 albums for Grammys. So, all right, great to see Nick on. All right, so Joseph Valander asks, can you record your stereo out in Cubase 13? So it doesn't actually record the stereo out, so there's a couple of approaches for this. One is if we have like a project where we have lots of different tracks that are appearing. So let's say we have, everything here is going out. So instead of recording the stereo out, one of the things you could do is just come over and, instead of doing it in real time, we could do it faster in real time and do like an export audio mix down. And we'll say, let's take our stereo and we want to create an audio track for that. So we'll set our left and right locators. We give it a name. And then we could just say export audio, and this is automatically going to be exported faster than real time into a track. Another method that some people will use is to kind of just create almost a print group. So we'll select all of the tracks in your project here and say, okay, we want to take all of these tracks and we're going to add a group channel to the selected channels, and we'll call this like our sub mix. So as we work with this, we can now set an audio track, and its input will be our groups, and we'll say our sub mix. So now as I add this track and we play, and I place this into record, we are now just capturing all of the audio in real time in this track. So you can do it in real time by kind of routing everything to a pre-group, or just export your file, which is actually faster than doing it that way. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Joseph. All right, so we see Michael Pierce says evening all, and he's sneaking in for half an hour. So hope you can make it to the Chuck Ainlay Zoom. All right, always wonderful to see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. All right. Okay, so we have Stevie Ray says, hey guys, absolute novice beginner in Cubase 13 Pro, tuned in from County Down in Northern Ireland. Thanks for joining us today, and we hope to see you on many more live streams. Any questions you have, just feel free to ask. All right, Nick Saya asks, hi Greg, did they fix the locate bug on my setup? If I hit and then type the bar number and cursor jumps to the bar, has worked in all previous versions. It doesn't. What it does is it highlights the beat and not to the bar. So yeah, that was fixed in 1303. So as you see, when I hit Shift plus P, it takes you right to the measure as opposed to the beat. So yeah, get the 13.03 update, and when you hit Shift plus P, then you can now see that the bar is highlighted as opposed to the beat. So that was resolved last week in the update. All right, so we have Rajige Dasi asks, how to compose a beat in Cubase as you would in FL Studio. I have the impression that you need to import a library containing the various samples, snare, kick, etc. to compose the beat. An example, please. So I don't know how it's done in FL Studio. I've never really run it. So, but let's say we'll do a new project. All right, so what do we want to use as the basis for the beat? So I'm going to open up an instrument track. I will open up a Groove Agent SE, and that's the included plugin. I will right click and we will load a particular group. So I'm going to load a preset. So I'm going to load a kit with patterns. So as we do this, we can now, let's say I'll just look for one. Okay, so now I have some sounds. I'm going to go to my MIDI inserts. All right, so there's a number, this is one way of doing it. There's a number of different ways. I can now load up my Beat Designer plugin. So as we come over, we can now see kind of our different tracks. So I'm going to carry over the name. So if we wanted to come here, we can say we're going to create the drum map. So once we do this, I can hit play and say, okay, we want this kick. We could choose, you know, I want this to be 32. So say, okay, now I want my snare. Then say I want to adjust the velocity down of this snare hit. And if we wanted to put flams on notes, I could just click in the bottom here. So let's say I want to put in a couple hand claps. And let's do some hi-hats. So now once kind of over here, we could have kind of different bongos if you want to add percussion elements. And now whatever tempo you have, it'll just kind of automatically sync right along with it. So let me know if that makes sense for your workflow. So again, you could just load an instrument and on the MIDI inserts, go to Beat Designer, and then you could have all sorts of fun making beats. All right, so we see Mr. Dolly 67 asks, could you show how we could put a nice icon on third-party VST instruments? So if it is like when we go to like your media, we see VST instruments and you don't see kind of the pictures. As soon as we open up a instrument, what you could do on for third-party instruments, all you have to do is open up the plugin once and you'll see this little camera. So click on it with the camera and that will take a picture of your settings or what the plugin looks like. And then as you go for third-party plugins and instruments in Media Bay, you'll then see that particular camera automatically show up for you. So again, once you have the plugin loaded, come right over here, click on this little icon. I guess the third-party companies could do it and install it with the particular plugin if they wanted to, but you could always make it yourself. All right, so wonderful to see Gareth on. It's been a while. All right, so we have 3/4 a hot mess. All right, and Gareth is happy to see Michael Teams on. All right, so Gareth is saying Retrolog a classic. All right. sorry, my chat field jumped. Let me zoom back to where it was. All right, so you see from Patrick Mandeville A, it just says, thank you, Greg. All right. All right, so we see Dean Garvey Jazz says, I made a retrolog preset to sound similar to Hammond B3 where the modulation pedal changes left and right balance instead of pitch change like a rotating speaker box. Must be stereo. That's great. Yeah, thanks for letting us know. Yeah, so retrolog is incredibly powerful. Okay, Michael Teams wants everyone to whack the like button. All right, so we see Gareth Kitch says, feature request, add folder to selected tracks. All right, so let's see if this would work for you, Gareth. So let's say if we have number of audio tracks, we'll just add some more. Okay, so make sure. So let's say we have this. I'm going to select these particular tracks. Add folder to selected track. So when we right click, we'll just see so move selected tracks to new folder. So we can now just go right there. So let me know if that's helpful for you. So that way we could add the folder to the selected track. So again, just right click, move selected tracks to new folder. So let me know if that would meet your feature request. We'll give you that feature free for showing up today. All right, so we see from Suede TV and Recording Studio asks, how do I lock track separator? So I have a marker track and tempo track, and I do not want them to cursor up and down with the rest of the tracks, please. Okay, so let's say we have a marker track and a tempo track. So, all right, so we have tempo, all right, and I'll just throw in a beautiful tempo change here. And let's add a marker track. Okay. So as we go to our markers, okay, so what we could do is if we just go to your project and we could choose divide track list, then now we can move our markers, you know, lead vocal track, whatever we want at the top here. And now as I scroll up and down in my project, and I'll just add a number of tracks here so we could scroll more visually. So now these tracks are in the divided track list, and you could turn this on and off by clicking right here. So now they'll scroll, or if we click here, or again by going to your project to divide track list. So once we have those, I can scroll all of these tracks up and down using my mouse scroll wheel, and these tracks will stay positioned in kind of the upper zone of the divided track list. All right, Maximus asks, what's the fastest way to make a macro for bouncing a track with the inserts applied, then deactivating the track and hiding it? I'm on Cubase 13, thanks. Okay, so let's say we have an audio track. All right, so let me just jump to some loops. Okay, so let's say we have this, and I want okay, so we'll take this and let's add some effects. So I will come over, let's go to delay. I want to add a flanger, so obvious stuff. Let's come over to, all right, so we have these effects on, so the macro is bouncing a track with the insert applied, then deactivating the track, and then hiding it. I'm on Cubase 13, thanks. All right, so one thing that you could do is just come over here. So I have this, and let's say it's a virtual instrument. If you just go to the render in place, we can just come over. So let's go to your edit, to render in place, go to your render settings. And then at this point, I'm going to, as we do this, I'm going to select the track. So at this point, I'm going to say, let's edit to render in place, to render settings. And then here we could just choose to remove source tracks. So at this point, we could choose to disable the tracks if you wanted to, but you could also just remove the source track. So as I do this, it'll render it and automatically apply the files to it. And if we want it to, to do that, and if we wanted to just hide the particular track, we could choose to disable the track also in the rendering. So if you wanted to go back like to the original MIDI, we could go to render in place. Let's go to our render settings, and instead of removing the source track, we could disable the source tracks, and then we could choose to hide that particular source track. So now when I render, we can now come right over there. We go to our track visibility, and this original track is hidden. So I don't think you need a macro to do it, but just use the render in place functions. So again, come right over here to edit, to render in place, and select again the track and not the event. And you can choose to disable the source tracks and then hide the source tracks. So at that point, you could just render and then it's all hidden. So it's all kind of possible without having to make a logical editor preset to do it directly with the render in place settings. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Maximus. Okay, so we see fingers on strings. Says, if you please, when inserting built-in strings from Cakewalk and Cubase, add instrument track to sustain, not stopped. Please answer. So I don't have any Cakewalk instruments. So I don't know, but generally the strings will stop as soon as you have the sustain. So make sure it's not your pedal. Sometimes pedals can be reversed and have the incorrect polarity on the pedal. But if it's only that one particular instrument, it may be kind of systemic to that particular instrument. And I'm not sure if Cakewalk is still in business or not. All right, so we have a question. Can you explain, please, the new function by editing many parts in Cubase 13 and Cubase 12? We also can work with some parts of MIDI. Thanks. All right, so I think this is with the MIDI key editor. So let's say if we want to go to this project. All right, so the concept was before we would kind of double click to enter an editor from the project window. So often what people would do when they're working on like a large orchestral piece, they would come over here, open up the piano part, let's say the violin part, and then they would often have to close this, and now I want to see the viola part, and now I want to see this, my cello. So what we could do now is if we enable some additional functions, so one of them would be the when we come over, we can see the tracks at the top, and we could also enable the selection pane on the left hand side. So instead of selecting events, opening the editor, closing the editor, selecting other events, opening the editor, what we could do now is we could select the events from within the editor. So this way you can say, oh, I want to see only this track. I want to see my horns, horn 1 and horn 2 with my bass part. Now I want to see horn 1 and horn 2 with my flute part. So we could select all of our different tracks directly from the left-hand side. And once we have the tracks turned on right here, now we can say, I see the project arrange page. So I can say, oh, I really like this part that the horns are doing. I just want to copy that. And then we could copy, basically emulating the particular project window within the MIDI editor, so we could treat it as more of a macro view as opposed to kind of the micro view that we expect within the key editor. But this way we could select which track, which events we want to edit. Also, we could, pick and choose what parts we want to see very easily using kind of the new multi-MIDI editor. All right, I'm going to paste the Zoom meetup. So once again, this is Chuck Ainlay. So this is a good one to catch. Hope to see many of you on there. All right, so Vincenzo asks, once a beat preset has been loaded into Groove Agent, how can I export the parts, bass drum, snare drum, hi-hat, etc. to audio? So it really depends on the output routing of the particular tracks. So let me we'll jump back. Okay, so now let's come over. Let's say we have a drum pattern here. And as I play this particular pattern, and we look at it in the mix console, everything is now set to one stereo output in the mixer. So I want to add additional outputs, and this could be different for different drum programs. So if we wanted to go to the instrument and go to the mixer, now I can say I want the kick to go out of output 2. Sorry, let me just solo this. All right, so now you see our kick. Let's take the snare out of output 3. So however you would do this, so in Groove Agent, like an acoustic agent kit, we would just have, so we could see our different outputs here. So let's take our overheads, send us like output 6. So once I have the routing done, all I would need to do is at this point, select the event, go to edit to render in place. We'll go to our render settings. We want to have it set to channel settings. And as we hit render, each of those outputs would automatically be rendered independently. So like the render in place is going to be based on the audio routing. And if we have this set up in a beat agent kit, how we would do the routing is we would just select, and then we would see in the instrument, we go to the main tab, we could select the 32 stereo outputs right there for each pad. And then once that's done, at that point, just do a render in place, and the rendering will follow the output routing scheme. All right, so wonderful to see Tiago checking in from Brazil. See, Gareth says, sampler track, I've not dived into it since the upgrades. This weekend might be the time. All right. All right, George Conte asks, now that the project browser has been removed from Cubase 13, can I still use it if I upgrade to Nuendo 13? So it's not going to be, project browser is not in Cubase 13 or Nuendo 13. And we have a question also, will I lose my Cubase license if I do so? So if you upgrade from Cubase 12 to 13, your Cubase 13 license will run Cubase 12. So you, but I think if you go from Cubase to Nuendo, you would, I believe, I haven't checked it just to make sure because I always have a Cubase license and a Nuendo license. Maybe other people that just have a Nuendo license could share if it opens up Cubase. So, but I'm not absolutely sure, but but all the functions in Cubase 13 are in Nuendo 13. So, all right. So we see Aunt O says hello everyone and thank you, Greg. So you're welcome. All right, Tiago asks, can you please explain in some details what is real-time, ASIO guard, and peak in performance window? I'm recording some old cassettes and peak is indicating red sign. Any help? So usually, it shouldn't, I wouldn't think that recording cassettes would do that, but let's take a look. So we'll go to your studio, to studio setup, and we'll come over here. And so when we see, obviously we could activate the multi-processing. What ASIO Guard is going to allow you to do is, as there's buffer sizes. So if we run a smaller buffer for instruments or tracks that are being recorded, so what it's going to allow us to do is to have the other tracks play back at a higher buffer, so that only the tracks that are being actually recorded are running at the lower buffer. So this can make your CPU seem like it's being utilized better, because while tracks that are already recorded may not need to be running at lower buffers, just the tracks that are actively being recorded. So that's what that does. So, and when we see our real time and peak in the performance window, okay, so this may be with more with ASIO Guard, sorry for misunderstanding. So let's come over here to our audio performance. Okay, so this will be broken down. All right, so we can see kind of peaks, and this could be, what your overall CPU is doing. And when we see real time versus ASIO Guard. So if I load up a project here, and let's say I'm going to record enable this, and let's put on some heavy plugins, let's say the vocal chain. All right, so we can see that my ASIO Guard, if I let's say duplicate this track a couple times. All right, so as I duplicate one more time, so let's say all of these 4 tracks are selected. So when we kind of hit record, the tracks that need to kind of do that need to do processing ahead of time. So let's say if we are recording, and let's put on like a multi-band compressor, these will often kind of do it. So, but ASIO Guard, this is for the tracks that are record enabled. So when I come over, and let's say we'll see these kind of creep up based on the calculations that need to be done, kind of in almost like a prefetch. So where we need to have different processing going on. So if I turn off the record enable of these, we'll see that the ASIO Guard will go down. So let's say, so now as we press, so now we could have real-time performance increases because these plugins could be on the project but are not being record enabled. So as this is kind of the ASIO Guard architecture, we could think of this. So peaks will indicate exactly kind of what your we could think of this as roughly what the audio performance is, and real time is for tracks that are not record enabled or monitored, and ASIO guard will indicate tracks that are monitored and record enabled. So I think that transferring a cassette shouldn't really trigger that unless you're running like really, really low latencies with that. So all right, see Michael Pierce, he has to sneak out to educate someone. All right, Tiago asked question, what is the difference in recording 24-bit and 32-bit float, and also 48K, 96K, 192K? 192K is the maximum, my URT2, and UR44 looking for best settings to record vocal takes. So, you know, I would say that I would record at 32-bit floating point, because that, if you actually clip the audio recording, you could just bring down the gain and still be able to see that. So let's set up just a quick example to show this. And I'll just show through like an exported file. So the sample rates can be more subtle between the different changes. So if you're doing something like super squeaky clean Americana, Alison Krauss type of stuff, then it's like, oh, that's when, you know, 192K can make a nice difference. You know, if you're recording like a hip hop thing, you may not notice the benefits of it. Okay, so let's say we have this particular file, and let's say in the middle of the file, I came and we export. So we look at this file. I want to take this clip here, and I want this to be, we'll knock this up by where that's basically going to clip. So as we listen to this, all right, so that section is going to clip. So let's say I want to take this particular file and let's export it as a 24-bit file. Okay, so we'll say 24, and we're going to insert this back into our project. So we'll create an audio track. Okay, and I will, at this time, not have it record enabled. Sorry about that. All right, so we can see that we have that clip. Now I'm going to export this as a 32-bit floating point file. All right, so same exact settings, 32-bit float. So now we'll export. Okay. All right, so we look at this particular file. We can see that this is 24-bit. And okay, so let's go ahead and bring down our files here. And we can see that even though this looks like it's clipping, when we bring down the clip gain, it's not really clipping. But with 24-bit, as we do that, we can see that the tops here are going to be kind of truncated down. So we can see that we actually kind of lose that information at the top. So it gives you a lot more headroom to work with. So if you do have an accidental clipping on a vocal recording, it will be able to accommodate that, and you can bring the level down without clipping internally with the audio file. So I would say 32-bit floating point. If, you know, experiment with 48K, 96K, 192. I would say if your audio doesn't sound good, it's not a sample rate problem, but 32-bit floating point will give you the capability if the singer just all of a sudden just, kills one note level wise and it's clipping on your end, you could recover it where you can't do that in 24-bit fixed point. All right, great to see Lawrence from Barn Door Recording, Rhode Island. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see Ismail Bay says, hi, Greg Ismail from Cape Town, South Africa. I see when you open an instrument or audio track, they are colored. How do you get that? Thanks. Okay. So what I do is just set it up where we go to Preferences. And if we go to User Interface, and we'll go to Color, go to Track and Mix Console Colors. At this point, I will choose Use Previous Track Color plus 1. So now when I go to add a number of tracks, they will just increment in colors. So we come right over there, and we can see that the colors are automatically added. So go to Preferences, to User Interface, Track and Mix Console Channel Colors, and you could just say use previous track color or use previous track color plus 1. Thanks for joining us. All right, great to see John Costigan. Okay. All right, so we have Wilfried Godert. It says, is there a link for the live stream? So I'll post it one more time. We'll be starting in about 10 minutes. All right, Darren Flake asks, what's the best approach to make space for vocal on a 2-track? So I'm not sure if you're adding a vocal to like a 2-track instrumental or if you're doing 2 vocal tracks. If you could maybe Darren let me know that. We'll see if we may not have time to get to it today, but if you want to email me, but let me know if it's a vocal on with a 2-track instrumental or if you have 2 vocal tracks. All right, so we have Alcadroid says tuning in from County Down, Northern Ireland, just upgraded to 13 from 12, running a lot better. So, all right, so we see still no 4K stream. So is that with the YouTube live stream? So I think that the live stream is set up to only transmit to 1080p. So it's kind of a limitation of YouTube. So let me know if that's what you mean, DJFK. But you could usually go to the bottom. Clear my throat. You could usually go to the bottom and adjust the settings, and the settings is based upon. So if it looks a little blurry and it says 720p, that's setting the optimum settings for your internet speed connection. So, but let me know if that's it. So you got yours as Step Designer Flam Trick. I didn't know that. Learned something new today, so that's great. All right, so we see Rodrigue Dossi says, thank you a lot for your example. It's exactly what I need. Great job. I'm sorry, I'm not a good beat maker, so I missed that day in school. All right, let me just... All right, my chat field jumped and back to where I was. All right, Alcadroid says, I make a lot of drone-based ambient with lots of reverb. Lots of reverb is causing harsh frequencies. Any ideas how to tame those frequencies? So one thing that you could always do with reverb is, when you have a track and it's going to a reverb. So let's go ahead and just add an effects channel track to this. All right, so what you could do is actually just, and this used to be like the way to make cheap reverb sound better in the old days, is just going to the the effects return channel and just EQ those, try EQing those particular frequencies out. So this way you could EQ your reverb return so that the reverb itself isn't adding harshness to your mix. Okay. See, Gareth says, move selected tracks to new folders, revelation of the day. So just think of it like early Christmas gift from Steinberg, because we like you. Okay, John Costigan is giving everyone free legal advice, which is always appreciated, and his advice is to gently nudge the like button. All right. All right, inactive user asks, so you just see what is from Wilfried, I'm sorry, what is the password, the code? So I think it's in the link, so let me know. But I posted again, so let me know if you have problems with it. But I'll share kind of the opening view of it as well, so people could see it as we start. All right, inactive user asks, is there a way to use inserts of the bus before the track that is routed to the bus? When I add effects to the track itself, the effects been processed after the bus. Hope you can understand me. So if we have, like in this case, we have this track, and then and as we go from left to right, we can think this is the basic signal flow. So we can go to our inserts, our channel strip and EQ, and then this ends. So if we wanted to apply processing before the channel leaves the bus, we could just come over here and, by default, the inserts themselves will be before the bus. So at this point, this processing would go on and then send that out to the bus. And if we wanted it to be post fader, if you just kind of, right click, we could move this to like a post fader slot. So if you wanted to change the order, so you could have these be pre-fader or post-fader just by moving this green line. Okay, so we see from Sven Isaacson, thanks for being on, great to see you. Can you please go through setting up an external instrument in audio connections, including the MIDI channel and list of the instrument patches? Okay, so let's say we want to set up an external instrument for like a Korg 05 RW, something like that. So let's go to, I'm going to first come over here to my more options. Let's go to my MIDI device manager. So I think I have my Korg 05 RW. So we could install a device here. And this is where we could basically load up the patch scripts. We can give it our MIDI communication. Okay. And when we go to, let's say we want to open the device, we could come over and we can see like our 16 MIDI channels. We can see our patch banks. So now what I want to do is go to the audio connections, go to your external instruments. Let's add our external instrument and where this is, and we could now go to our MIDI devices and we could say our 05 RW. I will call this our Korg. All right. And we're going to have like one stereo return. We're going to tell it where it is connected to here in our audio interface. So now when I go to add an instrument track, we will see external plugins, and then just see if that's all set up. Oh, so Korg, okay. Okay, so at this point we will add an instrument track. We'll choose the Korg, select add track, and now when we come over here, we could see all of the patches in that particular Korg 05 RW. So in the MIDI device manager, so go to more options to MIDI device manager. Here you can load up script, tell it where it's connected to MIDI wise, and then when you go to the audio connections, at this point we could go to your external instrument, and we want to associate that external instrument with the defined MIDI device. Okay, so we're right at time. We're going to go ahead and migrate over to the Zoom meeting. I'm going to post the link again. So again, this is just a way for people on the live streams to meet each other. So let's go ahead and start the Zoom up. All right, so we got some people in the waiting room. All right. Hey, how's it going? All right. All right, so we have Chuck joining. Yeah, I'll get mine on in just a second here. I'm going to show. Yeah. All right. All right, we'll give it our minute, let some people transition over. All right. All right, I'm going to paste one more time on the chat. All right, so we have David M joining, we have Jim Fox. All right, Trond from Norway. All right, I'll give it our minute and I'll end the live stream. Chuck, you're a popular draw here. All right, so Brian Sawyer, I think maybe you have the audio. I hear my voice kind of think maybe coming back from your or from you. All right, so we see Michael Teams. All right, I'm going to end the live stream, and then we'll